Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This is part 3. Excuse me. This is Slavery in Islam. Dr. Jonathan Brown. Dr. Yasser is over there to the right. And this video is sponsored by Mohammed. Mohammed. Let me say it again. You can sponsor a video. Just click on the thanks button, donate to the channel, request a video in the comment section, and I will do that video. You can request without donating, just takes a little bit longer. Subscribe to the channel. And click on that little thumbs up. That helps me out tremendously, bare minimum. All right, let's get back into the video.
One, we can't make different moral judgments about things that are very different. And two, the political nature of this means that slavery is usually what other people do. This has changed a little bit in the last couple of years because of increased American willingness to really turn a critical eye on, let's say, American prisons and American labor market. But you probably all recognize that this discussion about American prisoners being slaves, this is not very popular. This wasn't very popular a few years ago. It's only kind of become popular, I think, as a result of Donald Trump and sort of a notion of a far left resistance to Donald Trump, which has really made palatable a lot of ideas that would not have been acceptable at all in mainstream American society.
I'm going to take it back and say when prisons the idea of prison is you're arrested, you've done something, you get sentenced, you go there, and you are to rehabilitate yourself there. The concept in theory is good. You can get college education, you can learn a trade, or I shouldn't say that. I don't exactly know. I thought that's what the idea was. You could learn something, come out, and be a functioning member of society. The downside is not a lot of places want to hire you if you've been to prison. So it's like a catch-22. You learn something, but you can't apply it. And that's, look, in the end, that is your fault. You broke the law. Once you've done your time, you should be allowed back into society because you've served your sentence. It changed to me when it became less about the rehab part, prisons, and more about the money-making aspect. Prisons are made. They have workers working. You know, the old adage was they'd be making your license plates. So you're paying a hefty fee for a license plate that's being made in a prison for 3 cents a day or whatever. So it was slave labor in a way. You have to pay for, if you're inmate, you have to pay for everything. Your lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever. Any little snacks, you have to pay for it. It's a pay-to-play kind of thing. So you have to have somebody on the outside who's putting money into your funds so that you can buy an overpriced Twinkie or whatever. When we took away the aspect of trying to rehabilitate them and turn it into, let's just flood it with people and we make money off of it, then it's lost what it should have been for. My opinion.
10 years ago or 15 years ago. Okay. That's the first issue about kind of thinking about the definition of slavery and the slavery conundrum. Why is it so hard to talk about? Because it ties our mind in knots. It makes us hold internally contradictory ideas. So let's talk about abolition and the origins of abolition. There's two narratives about this. The popular narrative, which is also, by the way, a major scholarly narrative, is what? You can call it the moral awakening narrative. So what happens? Some point in the distant past, there was a few voices who said, slavery is wrong. And those people went out and argued. And then more people agreed with that. And then more people agreed with that. And then more people agreed with that. And then in the 1700s, it sort of grew into a sort of snowballed to have real substance and real mass And then the 1800s, especially in places where humans had become enlightened by the Enlightenment, like Great Britain and the United States, northern United States, people realized slavery was a gross intrinsic evil and had to be ended. And then they eventually convinced everybody in the whole world. And that's how we get to the modern day abolitionist consensus, which is that slavery is a transhistorical moral evil and it needs to be removed from the face of the earth. Right? That's what we can call the moral awakening narrative. There's a couple problems with the moral awakening narrative. As I said before, there's no religion or philosophical tradition that condemns slavery qua slavery, that condemns slavery as slavery, until the very earliest of the 1600s. Aristotle, Plato, St. Augustine, the Buddha, Jesus, Moses, the Prophet Muhammad, St. Thomas Aquinas. You just name, I can just go through the history of humanity. There's nobody who said slavery is in and of itself a moral evil. They could criticize abuses of slavery. They could criticize the wrong people being enslaved. But there was no moral minority saying that slavery was evil. I've counted, and I've done a lot of research on this, I've counted one person, like I don't mean one group of people, I mean one person, prior to the 1500s who said slavery, qua slavery was evil. It was a person named Gregory of Nyssa. He died in 394, the Common Era. He was from Cappadocia and Andalusia, and he was a church father there. He said philosophically and theologically, slavery is wrong. That's it. Until the late 1500s, there's a guy named Jean Baudin in France, died 1596. He says also slavery is wrong. It's evil. It harms the slave. It harms the master. And then in the late 1600s, you see it amongst American Quakers. There's when you see the real beginning of abolition. The idea that slavery as an institution needs to be gotten rid of. And then it really picks up in the 1700s and the 1800s.
This is weird. There are some people who were abolitionists. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm spacing on the. It might have been like Abraham Lincoln's father. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just yelled into the microphone. So, Abraham Lincoln's father had not plantations, Chris. He had legit farms, and he worked those farms, and he was a tough man, tough time, farming the land and doing what he could. He ended up moving to like Indiana, where there wasn't slaves, because he got to a point where he was farming his land, and when it came time to pick and sell your crop, he wasn't getting a good price. And that was because he was farming his land, doing everything he could, and he's putting his blood, sweat, and tears and labor into that field. And then when he would sell his crops, he would look at it and say, I worked so hard that I just didn't make what I feel I should have made, what to me was right or fair. But it was fair, but it wasn't when you look at your hard work, and what you're doing, you're looking at it saying, man, I don't know if that was worth it. Well, the alternative is you buy more land to farm more. Well, now what are you doing? Now you're stretching your labor more. You're getting into working more fields. Well, he would do that to a degree until he started looking at his neighbors who had slaves. And his neighbors are like, oh man, we are racking up the money. And I'm using all this money to buy more land. I'm getting more slaves. And he's looking at it going, I'm busting my ass to turn a profit. And he was turning a profit, but you understand what I'm saying? You know, if you were to break it down by the hours worked and what he makes, he's making nothing. While this other neighbor, it's all profit. He ain't doing anything. He's living his life. Oh, look, the harvest has come in. Look how much money I made. And so he moved. He kept moving because he wanted a place where it was like an even playing field, because he was going to outwork anyone. He was a goer. He's going to outwork anyone. But when it came time to selling, he wasn't able to do what they could do because they had slaves. He was one man working, let's say, 150 acres. While over here, this guy has 15 slaves working 150 acres. They're going to be able to pick more, produce more, sell more. They're on top of it. It's just him. You know what I'm saying? And so he had a harder time. And now telling that story, I completely forgot why I told the story. But I hope it goes along with why I stopped. I'm a fool.
So if this is a moral awakening, it means that basically all of humanity was sound asleep, out to lunch, until the 1600s. The greatest minds, the most righteous and pious souls of every single religion and philosophical tradition didn't know that slavery was wrong. Or, what's worse, maybe they know and didn't say anything. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمْ فَتِلْكَ مُصِيبَةٌ وَإِن كُنْتُ تَعْلَمْ فَالْمُصِيبَةُ أَعْظَمُ. I forget which one it is. Yeah, so if you what's worse, that they didn't know or they did know and they knew and didn't say anything? The point is, does this mean that a person today who knows slavery is wrong is more morally intelligent than Plato or Aristotle or Jesus or Moses or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I mean, forget about the theological problem that caused for Muslims. Just think about what that means about, why do we read any of their books? Why do we have any respect? If we're going to take down Thomas Jefferson statues, let's get rid of all this entire heritage. So that's the second problem with the moral awakening narrative, is what was brought up by especially historians from outside the first world, outside kind of the US and Europe in the mid-20th century. And this is what was called the kind of economic narrative or economic explanation. Okay, so I told you before, it's really in the 1700s that abolitionism starts gaining a lot of momentum, and the 1800s. Does anyone know anything else that was happening in that time period? Industrial Revolution, right? So is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that people start to say that slavery is a moral evil in precisely those places, namely Great Britain and the northern United States, precisely in those places where, one, the earliest stages of the Industrial Revolution take place, and two, where people had achieved unprecedented wealth without reliance on slavery? Is that coincidence? Aristotle made a very prescient point. You guys know Aristotle died 322 BC. Greek guy, lots of statues. He said, there will be slavery until looms spin themselves. You guys know what a loom is? Like a thing that weaves cloth. Until they move themselves, there'll be slaves.
But then the loom would be a slave to its own work. He also said, my feet are cold. Let me borrow some socks. Don't look that one up. I'm pretty sure that's accurate, though.
When did slavery become something that people talked about getting rid of? When human beings discovered that you can use water power and then fossil fuels to move things that used to be moved by animals and humans. That simply can't, I just simply can't accept that that that's a coincidence. Right? Here's the problem. Wait, you say, Professor Brown, you're telling me that abolition became a phenomenon with strength, that it even became something of note at all because of technology and economics? But what I feel in my heart isn't technology and economics. What I feel in my heart is, like when I hear the word slavery, or when I see a movie like 12 Years a Slave or Amistad, what I feel in my gut, you can't explain that by technology. You can't explain that by economics. That's moral revulsion. I feel moral revulsion in my gut. Correct? But here, there is great wisdom in the Islamic tradition of ethics and the Islamic tradition of moral epistemology. Muslim scholars, the vast majority, except for the Mu'tazila, we were talking about this earlier, right? And this is why they were wrong, I think. The vast majority of Muslim scholars did not trust your gut. It reminds me of George Bush. But people remember that now? You guys are a lot of old people in the crowd, so you remember George W. Bush. Remember he made decisions about his gut. Muslim scholars do not trust your guts. Why do they not trust guts? Why do they not trust someone feeling morally revolted? Because they were dealing with a world that spread from Egypt to Central Asia, from Southeast Asia to Senegal. And there's have you ever seen the movie? I don't know what to tell you. This is all research, people, okay? The movie The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, it's about Muslims, people. The Muslim is the hero of the movie.
So it's halal, huh?
Yeah, and there's no hanky-panky.
Hanky-panky.
Yes. There's a lot of violence. No hanky-panky. So it's actually a real story, except for the part with the monsters. But until the part with the monsters, it's actually a real story of an Arab diplomat named Ahmed ibn Fadlan, who in the 900s gets sent by the Abbasid Caliph to the land of the Bulgars in Central Asia. And on the way, he meets a bunch of Vikings. And he witnesses a Viking funeral. This is in the book, and it's in the movie. And what's in the movie is accurate to what's in the book. He sees them. I can't describe what they do. It's so disgusting. Just watch the movie, okay? It's so disgusting, I can't describe it. How they clean themselves, I'm going to tell you. They all pass around a little bowl of water, and they all blow their nose into the same bowl and spit into it, and they pass around and they're drinking it and spit. Okay, it's like the worst thing you can imagine. And then what they do to the body of the person they're burying and to the people involved is this I actually can't talk about. It's really disgusting. And Ibn Fadlan asked them, he says, how can you possibly do this? This is disgusting. And they say, what do you mean? This is totally normal. You guys are the disgusting ones. You take your dead bodies and you put them in the ground where the worms eat them? This is disgusting. How can you do this? So they understood that what grosses people out, what people think is morally disgusting, is really not, it's not a product of some way that your body or your mind is in tune with some kind of moral reality that transfuses in the world or that permeates the world. It's just custom. It's just urf. You guys know the concept of urf? It's just urf. And here's a good example today. If I brought, where are you from? Okay. If I brought you a plate of dog meat, like puppy meat with little puppy toes and ears, said, here's your dog meat, what would you do? No, I mean, I tell you, I'd feel sick to myself. First, I'd feel this is morally wrong, and I'd feel disgusted. Just imagine you're a random American. Random American would be outraged, morally outraged, and they'd be disgusted to the point of vomiting. In southern China, they have dog meat restaurants. Actual restaurants. Okay. the stuff that feels like it's wrong in your gut, that something has to be inherently morally wrong about this, for another person, to another person in the world today, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, it just wasn't a big deal.
And that goes with what I said, I think, in the first video, where a different time, people, sorry, I'm popping them peas, baby. People were different time. They looked at things differently. I mean, getting back to, since we're talking about the U.S., back when the good General George Washington was alive, that's my southern accent, I apologize. When he was alive, well, near the end for him, when he got sick, a common thing that they did, which actually contributed to helping him die faster, was bleeding. I don't know how common it was worldwide, but they used to think, we're going to cut open put a little notcheroo in a vein, and then bleed that arm into a bowl, and they would draw a good amount of blood. And then, stitch it up or wrap it up or whatever, and I'm getting the toxins out of me. All you're doing is you're sick with something. And now your body's fighting to make more blood. So you've basically just said to your immune system, hey, hold on for just a second. I'm going to Mike Tyson punch you. And you've just now caused another issue. You're not helping at all. You know what I mean? You're not helping at all. It's like if any one of you were driving and you had a tire blowout, right? And you called me and I was like, you know what I can do? I can let you use my push lawnmower. How does that help me at all? I don't know. That's pretty much, it's like you're not helping me at all. You're making the problem worse. Yeah, it's exactly what they did. Just getting back to what I was saying. Different time, different people. It's, I would love to go back in time just to try to understand sometimes, but just different time.
I want to ask you this question. This is really, I think, a very good point to keep in mind. If I told you that last week someone had been brutally murdered outside of this neighborhood, what would your reaction be? I mean, that's bad. Like, is that, if they catch the person who did it? Do I know the person who got killed? Let me ask you a question. I wanted to, how explicit I can be with this audience. Okay, if I told you that somebody married a 10-year-old girl, what would you say? A 50-year-old man.
We all know the example.
No, I'm just...
It doesn't work for us.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask, I don't know, I feel disgusted by that in my stomach.
Yes, it's disgusting by the standards of today, but back in those days, and I'm back in the 1700s, a 30-year-old man could marry a 13 or 14-year-old girl that was his cousin. That's nasty to me. So, what are we talking about here?
But guess what? Murder is wrong. Every society in human history considers murder to be wrong. Every society in human history considers murder to be wrong. Yet I told you someone who's murdered, and yeah, it's bad, but I mean, okay. until basically 100 years ago, slavery was completely normal in many parts of the world. Unremarkable, unobjectionable morally to many people in this world. And until the mid-20th century, getting married to teenage girls or younger was normal in the United States. And in fact, it's still normal in lots of parts of the world today. So the things we feel the most disgust about, I'd say in America, I'd say the things we feel the most moral disgust about are slavery and pedophilia. Those are the two things we feel the most moral disgust about. These are two things that were common and unremarkable in the recent past. And the thing that is universally prohibited throughout, universally wrong in all societies, namely murder, yeah, it's wrong, but we don't get disgusted by it. Because disgust is a cultural construct. Disgust is culturally conditioned. What disgusts somebody in one society, I'm not just talking physically, I'm talking morally. What disgusts someone in one society doesn't disgust someone in another society. Because disgust is a way that a culture affects moral change.
To me, having multiple wives, it's not disgusting. I just don't understand it. But I'm not from a culture where that is common and acceptable. But I look at, there are some religions in America, I think the Mormons. I think you can marry multiple people with the Mormons. And then there was the David Koresh cult thing where he took on many wives. I think he even killed the husbands. And I'm like, wow. Okay, then. Doesn't seem right to me. But there are other cultures that are like, yeah, many wives. Take a lot of wives. Kids with all of them. Spread that gene. And I'm like, okay, not my thing.
It's the way the culture affects moral change. So it's not surprising that on those issues where the change has been most dramatic, you find the most intense senses of disgust.
I mean, what am I? Have I offended you? You keep making sounds. I keep moving you. That is my fault. Got a little lotion there, huh? You want me to rub that lotion in for you? Huh? So we're going to go ahead and end this video here. And this is part 3. We'll be back with part 4. I'm air frying my French toast. Big Texas toast slices. Oh, it's delicious. But I'm air frying it, and I got to flip them. It usually takes like an hour. Yeah, I know. You feel sad for me, don't you? You should. I'm just going to have to go get another cup of coffee. If you could, just this cup does not look that color. Now I'm angry. I'm going to end this video here. Be back with part 4. But until then, have a good day. Have a good night.